BSU TV, Educational Access Television, Bowie.
Hi, I'm Danny Queen. Welcome to another exciting edition of Color Me Poetry this evening. I'd like to welcome my most wonderful guest. She's a storyteller to the highest order, my good friend, Miss Shindana Cooper, and her daughter, Malika. Welcome, sisters. Welcome to Color Me Poetry. It's been a long time since you've been here with us, and we're glad to have you back. The only difference is now you're an international storyteller. Tell us about your storytelling and a little bit about yourself, how you got started, and where you've been. You've been everywhere, I know that.
Not quite everywhere. But there isn't anything unusual about the way that I started. I started off telling stories to my daughter.
Wow.
And I held her in my lap in a rocking chair, and I told her stories. And when my son came along, then she sat on her special little rug on the floor, and I held my son, and I told him stories. And my last child, Toya, when she was born, my son refused to give up his space on my lap, so I had him on one side and Toya on the other.
These stories weren't no Three Little Pigs stories.
No, not unless the pigs had color. So, no. I told them African stories, and I told them African-American stories, and I told them family stories. Family stories are just so important, because without the family stories to rely on, you wound up with children who think that problems that they have, they're the only ones in the world to ever have those problems. They don't know that Aunt Ruth had them and Uncle Earl had them, and so on.
There's a common bond.
Yeah, and they feel disconnected. You've seen these children. They're out doing anything and everything. They feel disconnected.
Were stories passed down to you?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
It's been a family tradition.
And she's trying to pass them on to me. Okay.
I'm
she
glad
wants
that
me
you
to
asked
pass
that.
them on, but I think my little sister will pass them on before I do.
But your feet, when you do your dance, Malika, your feet tell
them.
a story.
Right.
Yeah.
So we all have our own way of going about it. My mother told me stories. My grandmother told me stories. They told me historical stories and family stories. My father told stories too. We kind of call them tall tales. The sisters and brothers sort of call them lies. You understand? They do stretch, you know.
They have a great tradition of that in the African American community.
Yes.
Of telling stories.
In a storm, you know, when you were a little boy and it was a storm, you had to turn out the lights, turn off the TV. You had to sit down, and then they would tell us stories. It was a wonderful time.
I had an uncle who used to tell them scary, frightening stories.
Yeah, well, they'll do that.
You know, yeah, you know.
And to this day, when I hear a scary, frightening story, I don't watch horror pictures on television, and I don't listen to scary, frightening stories, no.
I remember as a child listening to or watching the Thriller and Chiller and all that. And I used to get, I'd be Saturday night, I'd be home by myself and had the lights up. And then the scary part would come on, and I'd get up and turn on all the lights in the house, you know. But stories are such wonderful tools.
You can tell her there's a witch around the corner.
And I'll have every light on in the house.
She didn't have to see anything. That's true. But it's such a part of our tradition with the storytelling. A long time ago in Africa, the elders used to tell stories in the evenings. All of the children in the village would come and listen to the stories before they would go to bed. The stories would keep the elders young, and it would fascinate the children, and the parents would teach lessons with the stories. That's how we started. And there's such a connectedness between the stories, the music, and the dancing. Now, you know as a little boy that your parents and your grandparents would give you a chance to entertain them.
Oh, yes.
But they would also be teaching you a lesson while they were entertaining you. And so they started putting meanings in the dances. The dances would depict certain scenes and would mean certain things, and dancing was part of a celebration, and the music and the singing is what brought it all together. It wasn't a spiritual experience, but it was something that you looked forward through the long day. You looked forward to this at night, and you slept well.
Yes.
You slept well. You knew that you were connected with the ancestors and that they were guiding you and protecting you and so on. It's wonderful.
Now, you know, I'm from the country. And in the country, when I was growing up, the time I was growing up, not that I ain't that old now, but when I was growing up as a child, living in the country, we used to have mosquitoes, you know, and my grandmother would get rags and put in the old tub, and the smoke from the tubs, it would set it fire and then put the fire and let the smoke, and sometimes we'd carry that tub through the house, and that would help get rid of this. Mosquitoes didn't like smoke.
Right.
And sometimes when we'd send around the smoking tub outside in the summertime, late in the evening, people would tell stories.
That's what it's all about.
And you just told a story right there.
Yeah.
Oh, was that a story?
But do you see, and you need to continue to do that. We need to go back to our traditions. Quite a number of them we've brought across with us, but there are so many of them that we don't take time for. The radio.
Yes.
We used to listen to stories
On the radio. Yeah.
It's wonderful now that they have storytelling on the TV. And it's all a part of the tradition, but nothing beats sitting down with the babies and telling the stories. And have you noticed they always want to contribute? And then they want to sing.
Now, when you're telling stories to young people, do they oftentimes stop you and ask questions and say, what about this? You know?
All the time. The babies. You have got to have a really good animated story for the babies. Number one, if it gets boring, they'll get up and walk away.
Really?
They mean no harm. It's just their attention span is someplace else. They'll get up and they'll go.
They're like the litmus test of the children.
Excuse me. And then they try to help you with the story. I was asked to tell scary stories, country stories. So I started talking about Wally and the hairy man. And I said, Wally wasn't afraid of those great big old ugly birds up in the trees. And he wasn't afraid of those green, slippery, slimy snakes. I said, but what Wally was worried about was coming up behind him. And the little children would say, you better watch out, Wally, because he's right behind you. He's going to get you. They don't care. They just tell you.
What is imaginary or real?
Oh, yeah, you see. But they're wonderful. They're so open. And they're so free. And if you listen to them, children instinctively will tell you stories. Children never give you a straight answer. Well, what happened? Now, Reginald, what happened? What happened? Well, you see, Ma, I was walking down the street, and there goes the story.
Yeah.
That's the way we
I remember one time when I was little, I had broken something in the house, a lamp or something, and I went into this long story about it.
Trying to save yourself.
And I remember my father said, well, like, that's all right, just forget about it, because the story's so long, he just got frustrated with it.
So did you try that from then on, figuring it was going to work?
Yeah, I tried. I said, well, maybe this will work for now.
No,
Malika came home late from
don't
school
do that.
one day.
Don't do that.
She came home late from school one day. I was so afraid. I didn't know what to do.
I had to be 5 or 6, maybe.
Now, it wasn't that far away. The school was.
Okay.
Mom, the airplane landed in the middle of the street. And I didn't want to... of my king. These were some of the decisions that we had to make. Sometimes it is better to let the ancestors take care of the ones we love. For it is a far better life than the one that we have here. There are so many things that we need to remember, so many things that we need to teach one another. And I think we need to go back to the soil and go back to the source so that we will remember who we are. For one day we will be the ancestors. And so, let me take you back, way back, back to Africa. I present to you Maleka, Maleka, Maleka. Hey yo, chakalumba yo, nikele makusaye. Hey yo, chakalumba yo, nikele makusaye. Hey yo, chakalumba yo, nikele makusaye.
This is Color Me Poetry. I'm Danny Queen. We'll be right back.
You're watching BSU TV, Educational Access Television, Bowie State University. Channel 17B with Maryland Cable, 27A Jones Communications, Prince George's County.
I'm Danny Queen. Welcome back to Color Me Poetry. We've just heard wonderful, wonderful story by my good friend Shindana Cooper and the beautiful dance by her daughter Maleka. Shindana, welcome to Color Me Poetry. You've been with us before. You're certainly not a stranger.
Thanks for having me.
Let's talk about the story that you told. Such a wonderful, such a powerful story.
Well, that story was actually born on the road in Canada, between Ottawa and Quebec, or it might have been between Quebec and Montreal. And it was during Black History Month. And you kind of get in a groove when, for the entire month or more, you're telling slave narratives or African and African-American stories. And so I, as a mother and as a woman, I thought about a lot of the atrocities and the fact that a lot of babies were born on the slave ships. And so I thought about this one woman, and she was a queen, and she knew royalty, she knew her place in life and what was expected of her. And then strangers came to the shore, and no specific purpose, no reason, they just snatched anyone they could get a hold of. They didn't pick and choose, they just grabbed everybody. And she kind of got caught up in that. And then they put her in the belly of the slave ship, which is called the belly of the beast.
Yes.
And she lived in darkness, and the floors and everything were filthy. They had no facilities. The air was foul. And when babies are ready to come, babies will come. There's no stopping it. And so, sure enough, she had her baby. And the interesting thing is that she had her baby naturally. You know, it's not natural for us to lay on a table, put your feet up in the air, have forceps and pull babies out. You just kind of squat down and let gravity help you to deliver that baby. You see, and that's the natural way to do it, and that's the way Africans did it. And so, sure enough, her baby was born, and the first place that his body laid was on that dirty, filthy floor.
So the baby was born in the belly
slave ship.
of the slave ship.
That's right. You see, there were no other little rooms or anything. She was chained, she was shackled. There were people right beside her. She didn't know these people. These people didn't know her. When they put us in these slave ships, they made it a point to mix up the cultures. Americans have a tendency to believe that Africa is a country where it's really a continent.
Yes.
And they believe still today that, oh, he's African, let's meet it, let's introduce him to this other African. If they are from different cultures, different countries, different languages, and so they couldn't really communicate, and that part was planned. And so there was no one to help her. And she was chained, she could have been chained to a man or a woman. There was no privacy, no nothing. She just had to have her baby when that baby was ready to come. And then You know, she didn't even know if it was a girl or a boy or what. She just, when she lifted her baby up off the floor and she just started feeling around, and then you could see it in her face because she said, my baby, my son, my king. You see, so that was a discovery time right there. And the thing that was so sad, she couldn't even look into the face of her child. Because it was darkness. They didn't give them big picture windows so they could see the water.
She knew he was a king.
You see, but she knew right off.
And in her mind, he was still a king.
And one thing that I did not say in this story that sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I say, you can take a bird and break its wing and make it walk. And it is merely a bird walking. But you can take my baby, my son, my king, and enslave him. And that will never alter the fact that he is and will always be a king. You see? Nothing changes. He was born a king no matter where he was born, and he will remain a king. That's a legacy that's been taken away from so many of our men who are walking the streets now, who are going to work or going back and forth home to their families and so on. All different walks of life. They don't understand that they are kings.
And been scripted.
That's right.
Of manhood.
But you see, I have a whole new way of looking at them now. I have a whole new way of looking at all of us. Because when I'm driving my car down the street and I see us doing all the things that we do, I see Africans in someone else's country.
You know, it's funny you said it because a friend of mine just come back from Ghana, West Africa, and she was saying when she walked down the street, she see people who look like, she's like, that could be my cousin.
That's right.
You know, that look just like my cousin.
That's right. That's right.
That should tell you something.
It's a shame we can't trace it all the way back either.
But you know, that's not going to stop us. Because I'm a griot and I've dedicated the rest of my life to helping to plug up the holes in African-American history.
And to bridge
That's
the
why
gap.
I travel to the different countries and so on. When I see these Africans in someone else's country, then I look at them and I say they are surviving. That's all we're doing. We are surviving. Now, there are different levels of survival, but by whose yardstick are we measuring this?
Yes.
You see, here you are, very prosperous, and you have a television program, and you've published I don't know how many books. You have survived. In my eyes and the eyes of other people, you have succeeded. But does that mean that the man that's got the little corner grocery store that can only open when the produce comes in, has he succeeded? Because he too is surviving.
Right.
You see, so we need to change the way that we look at one another.
You know, in this country, we often measure success based upon monetary status. You know, well, oh, I'm middle class now. You know,
What is middle class?
What is middle class? I say as long as...
Take everything away and you're still a man.
And I say as long as conditions are the way they are for black people, whether on the continent or here, we're all in the same class.
That's right.
In a sense.
Exactly.
And just the mere fact that we are here, we're survivors.
And so many other folks need to hear what you just said. Because they are still out there measuring themselves by someone else's standards.
Yes.
When they don't know that they have arrived, they have succeeded, that they are surviving. I'm not saying don't push forward.
No, of course
and don't have ambition.
Right.
But don't let it break your heart and disillusion you because you haven't made your first million, or you haven't bought your first house, or that you don't have your own television program, because you've got a dream that a lot of other people have had, but your dream has come true. How many years you been doing this?
Oh, about 6.
You see, and other folks can't even get in the door. So that's how I take a look at it. And so I believe that if they had more knowledge about who they are,
self-knowledge,
they would stand up taller, and they would be stronger. And that knowledge would help us to put on the armor we need to fight that war that's out there.
But it has to be spiritual as well.
Well, we've always been spiritual.
Definitely.
We are undoubtedly the most spiritual people walking on the face of this earth. How do you think we've succeeded? We have been oppressed for so long. Folks talk about the Holocaust, but they give that another frame of reference. But the largest Holocaust that ever took place was ours.
We lost